Welcome to Strategic Edge, a podcast by leaders and for leaders. We're here to inform, instruct, and inspire leaders. We're going to share information about business models, about theories, but then we're also going to provide instructions. How do you apply those? How do you make them very practical? And finally, we're going to encourage you to act. My name is Ted Davis. I'll be your podcast host and your leadership coach. I have been a practitioner, a student, and a teacher of leadership now for nearly 60 years. And as my future guests and I inform, instruct, and inspire you, I encourage you to do three things. First of all, absorb what we share with you. Make it your own. Take it on. Take notes. Make it your own thoughts. Make it part of what you now believe about leadership. Number two, reflect on it. What does it mean to you? What do we affirm that you're already doing? What ideas do you pick up about how to improve? And then thirdly, we want you to commit to an action plan so you can continue to move forward. So we want you to absorb, reflect, and commit. And with that, let's start today's podcast. I am thrilled to welcome to today's broadcast, Dan Tocchini. So Dan, wow, what a fabulous career you've had, 35 years helping leaders bring some magic. I love the way you say this, bring magic to their teams. You worked with teams from Interstate Battery to ESPN, to Smarty Pants Vitamins, Impulse Space. And then you've worked with not-for-profits. You and I share that in common. Homeboy Industries and Defy Ventures. Awesome. If we get to time, I'd love to get into what you do there. But the first thing I'd like to pursue is what you say here is that you get to a no-fluff approach to helping transform leadership teams. And what you try to do is three things. So I'd love to talk about first is courageous leadership, creative conflict resolution, and relevant restructuring. So tell me about each one of those. So let's start with courageous leadership. What do you mean by that? And how do you go out helping a team?
Well, courageous leadership is basically just means leaders that are willing to address the issues that are most threatening. If every leader knows that whenever you do something new or you implement something, you're going to add new problems as well. And the big challenge in leadership is which problems should we address to move the ball down the field? And so courageous leadership is the willingness to address the problems that are most difficult, and most difficult meaning they're either abnormal or they're pathological. A normal problem would be something like, if you and I just started a business, and after 8-9 months, we're having some revenue issues, right? So we're cash flow issues. Well, that's a normal problem for a young business. But if you and I are working 5-6 years together and we're still having those kinds of issues, well, it's abnormal and maybe pathological. And so, most leaders know what those are, and they usually represent a potential loss of some sort. In other words, if I have this conversation, I could lose the little I'm getting, even though I'm not getting what I want. I don't want the work back in my lap. I don't want to have to deal with a difficult conversation because I got 3 other things I got to do later on today, and I'm afraid it'll take me off my game or whatever. There's a million different conversations, but they don't want to have it because they're trying to avoid the conflict or they're trying to mitigate the potential problem rather than have what they're committed to turn out. And so it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to identify it, what the conversations might be, and then to go have them and have the next step creatively. Right.
So the intellectual and emotional courage to identify, here's the real thing, and then go have that conversation. So that's number one. Then you said the second part of that was creative conflict resolution. What do you mean by that, and how do you do it?
Well, first off, you got to be clear about what you want to get done. What's your mandate? What do you want to produce here? And then you got to think about the conflict itself. Like, what is this conflict? And I'm clear about what I want to get out of it. Now, how can I prepare to have it work the best? And to be the most creative, I want to do my best to stay out of survival. And the best way to stay out of survival, you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No,
Like,
you want to thrive.
that's right. I want to thrive. I don't want to be, I don't, like survival is, I don't want to look bad. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to feel like I'm out of control. I want to believe I'm on top.
Yeah.
And if I'm willing to risk the survival because I'm committed to something bigger than just my survival, that's where the courage comes in. And then the creativity is, I want to set it up so when I'm in the conversation, I don't get hooked and pulled around or get off a topic or get defensive. I want to be productive. I want to open up a new possibility. I don't want to walk away with the same problem. At the very least, I want to have a new problem.
Anybody come to mind as an example of who's had that courage, who's had those difficult conversations? Any heroes that come to mind that you'd
Well,
point
yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, Thomas More, but I mean, that's a little obscure for some people.
at?
I would say,
I'd really be a historian for that one.
yeah. I would say Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs faced a ton of heat. He made some big mistakes, faced them, came back and reinvented himself. And you know that he had really tough conversations with both those who are his advisors and investors, et cetera. I mean, he lost his company, then he worked his way back into the whole thing through starting competition. He really, I think, embodied the willingness to do that, to face his own limitations, then to invite others in. And you could see a big shift in him from when he was running Apple the first time to when he was running it the second time.
That's awesome. Well, then the third thing you said you did. So 3 things that you're doing when you're working with to transform teams: courageous leadership, creative conflict resolution, and then thirdly, relevant restructuring. What does that mean and how do you do it?
Yeah, relevant meaning relevant to the mission of the organization. So one of my first jobs, one of the biggest contracts I got as a young man was to restructure the finance department at ESPN. I responded to a RFP. And, long story short, I got the job. But one of the things one of the big tests was I had to be courageous because I ended up telling the new CFO that she was the problem. I mean, I was competing against 2 other big consulting firms and I got the RFP. I got in because a friend of mine was a director of HR there. And I submitted after I did my scoping of the deal. I came in and submitted a 2-page explanation. And then we all got an interview with the CFO. And she asked me, well, what do you think the problem is? And I said, look, I really want this work, but I got to get it on the right basis. If I lie to you and you give me the work, that's not going to work. So I'm going to tell you, it's you're the problem. And she goes, well, and she was real interesting. I mean, she's a fantastic woman. She just recently retired because it was that long ago I got that job. But her name is Chris Dreesen, and she was amazing. And she said, well, tell me more. And I said, well, you've got redundant systems out there. You've got these MBAs from Harvard and Wharton, you've got all these great, MIT, and they want to come in here and be creative. And they're identifying legacy systems that are no longer relevant to the mission that you're doing. When they come to you with suggestions, you don't have time, and they see it as relevant to what you say you're committed to, and they see it as making a difference. And then if they get handcuffed and you want to turn them into widgets or just fulfilling things that you could have an assistant do or you could hire other people to do, they want to go get creative. And so why not bring them to the table, see what they're seeing? Why not, if you can't, arranging a way where somebody can vet what they're doing and turn them back into it, that kind of thing. And so relevant means what you're going to do is going to be relevant to the mission. And what you're going to take out is relevant to the mission you're on right now.
Very good. That's awesome. So you had enough courage. I mean, you were living out what you're teaching your people
with sweaty palms, let me tell you.
And you obviously got the work.
I got the work, and I was there for almost 10 years, and Disney picked me up, and then they had me develop some curriculum on negotiating for their university. And then I ended up working with the Imagineering department, and they referred me to Interstate Batteries, and it was great because if you do something well, when execs leave and go to other places, they tend to call back on you.
That's awesome. One of the things what I asked in my questionnaire before we got together was, what set you apart. And you said your ability to, I love this, stand, order chaos, and release beauty by connecting and drawing people into difficult conversations. So again, another triad: stand,
Yes.
order chaos, and release beauty. Explain that a little bit more.
Well, stand is the key. If you ask somebody what makes a difference, you're going to get, like, say, hey, look here, we got a problem. What's going to make a difference here? And you get one of two answers usually. Somebody's going to say they're going to go to a mechanic. They're going to say, here's a strategy, here's a process, here's a special software. They'll think the problem is the symptom, because the symptom always shows up in some physical form. But what's really missing is a stand. Somebody who's willing to do whatever it takes, who's willing to risk their own job if that's what it takes, to find what the problem really is and resolve it, right? And that their point is, their aim is to resolve it, not do something and say, well, I did my best. Not, but hey, it didn't work, but we learned this, and this is what we're doing now. And they're going to stand to get it done. They're not going to get off it till it gets done. So stand, right? Stand
So
is,
say resolve. It sounds like resolve means we're in a better state. It's just not that we made it go away. We have improved the organization.
that's right. It may not even go away. We might have transcended it and able to contain it and still do and break through, right? It's not about how it looks. Is it producing what we said we're committed to produce?
That's awesome. Another thing that you shared in your advanced notes was that leadership is the truest form. It's continuously mobilizing the best of what we do. So tell us a little bit more about that. What is
Well, it's a series of conversations. Now, if you think about it, one of the biggest things I've noticed with some of my clients is they'll take somebody who's a fantastic individual, you know, performer, and then they'll put them in a leadership position, and they'll notice that the person struggles, because being an individual performer is very distinct from working with a group of people to get something done, causing results through people. So the idea is to liberate the gifts of the person. They've got to get a hold of what made them good, right? So they can train it into other people attitudinally and skill wise, right? But that's usually an issue because most people aren't aware of what really makes them good. And part of it is their stand, that the way they stand in the situation, the way they give themselves to the situation is usually far more, they're 100% in it, or there's much more of them in it than the average guy or the average woman who's doing it. And so to be able to liberate their best qualities, they've got to be willing to give themselves that way. And if they do, they'll start to order the chaos. They'll start to see order where there wasn't. They'll start to see signs like that, oh, things are starting to move a bit there, and people will start communicating more. And pretty soon, people are contributing their gifts instead of going head to head and arguing with each other. They'll be hard on the problem and soft on each other. And
so if I understand you correctly, that stand sounds like you are in a position that you are being very clear about how you see the problem, and you're going to say, here's what's right, here's what's wrong, and you're going to stand on the side of what you believe to be right.
well, yeah, I might say, this is what I believe. What do you guys see? And I want to hear what they say, because they may see something I don't, or they may see something that actually I might get information that will cause me to alter what I see and how I relate to it. So to be able to do that in a way that's an invitation, and that, like, because so often if you're leading a team and you've got an idea, other people may have other ideas, but they're afraid to say something because they want to get along and they don't want to ruffle feathers, and they might see something you don't see. How open are you to it?
So it sounds like to stand is to confront that we really have an issue, and we're going to root it out. We're going to dig deep and find out
That's right.
the cause, and not just simply put a rug over it. And we're not just
That's right.
to sweep it away. You're going to stand and go the distance to get the clarity about what you're working on.
Right on. And I'm willing to be wrong to get it done.
Wow.
And I think that's crucial. It's like, look, I'd rather have it turn out if I'm wrong. And this is it's a simple thing, but very, it's a vulnerable thing to say, hey, you know what? I think somebody on the team who may not have the same authority I have may see something I don't see, may be more resourceful in this situation. Am I willing to follow them? Because a good leader knows when to follow, right? And am I willing to empower them and lift them up and get behind them in a way that they get that they're making a difference, and the rest of the team sees that, and the trust level goes up. So I want banter. I want interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of sharing authority. That when you delegate some aspect of an activity to your subordinates, and just because you delegate to them doesn't mean you give up authority. You're sharing authority, and the whole team improves because of that.
And I know the buck's going to stop here. If I'm driving the department, it stops here. But I'm willing to take a risk with my team because I believe in, like, if they say something I believe in, I'm standing by it. And I'm putting my resources behind it.
Wow. This is profound stuff. I love this. I hope I'll have you back someday in the future. We can go even more deeply into that. But since we're running short on time, one of the things I always ask, what are 3 actionable items that our audience ought to take and work on because of what we've heard today? So what are your 3, or if you want to go to 4, you can do that. What are the actionable items?
Well, I would say, look, I would focus on, I really believe that conflict is where the greatest possibility lives in any organization. Conflict meaning around the most important issues. So the first thing is to identify conflict that you see is it feels like if I address it, it's risky, but I know that ultimately I've got to address it. And we have a saying, what you're not willing to face now will defeat you later. So what is it that you need to face now? Be clear about what it is, and then be clear about what you want to get out of it.
Excellent. Okay.
Right. Secondly,
Yeah.
that's number one. Secondly, give the person to whom you've got the conflict or people you have the conflict with an example of the conflict that you just stated to them clearly. Here's the conflict. Here, hey man, here's an example. This is where I see it happening. This is, and maybe I'm off, but this is where I see it happening. And when it happens, this is what happens for me. I want to get away from it, or I want to jump you guys, or I want to shut down. Whatever I feel like, whatever goes on, I want them to know.
Good.
And then I would let them know. And I do this, I prepare this way. And then I would want them to know what's at stake. If we don't get this done, here's what I think the future is going to look like. Because I want to look, people are 5 times more motivated to do something to prevent the problem than they are to have something happen. So if you can get them to see the problem and its potential down the road, and it's bad enough, they'll want to do something about it.
Good. I love that. Okay. So that's number 2, is give them clarity about the problem and
what you experience about it.
Yeah.
What the problems are, what the consequences are. And then I'd add what I have added to this, what I've contributed to this. I haven't talked about it, or when we've talked about it, I've cut you off, or I haven't listened, or whatever's gone. I want them to know I see how I'm contributing to this, and that my commitment is to get it done.
Wonderful. So your third thing is to admit your contribution and affirm that you're willing to get this thing solved.
Yeah. And I let them know, look, I've got some ideas about how to do this. I'd love to hear yours if you have some. I'd like to discuss this and get this clear. I want to develop a plan of action. So I create some order and we know what's coming next. So we agree upon the next step that we're going to take in order to clear it up.
Well, Dan, I cannot thank you enough. This has been a wonderful 20 plus minutes, and we're going to summarize this, have it in our episode notes so people can follow it. But thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. Any final thoughts?
Ted, thank you. I would say, I want to emphasize what you don't face will defeat you later. And I always remember, one of the things, I have a little sign in my office that says, you can't explain your way out of what you behaved your way into.
Can we say that one more time?
You can't explain your way out of what you behave your way into.
Behaved your way. Okay.
That's right. You've got to behave your way out of it as well.
Absolutely. That is awesome. Absolutely. Dan, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted. Bless you, man.
Now we got 3 ideas of what to share from today's podcast. So again, what I'd like for you to be able to do is take those ideas, make them your own, reflect on them. What do they mean to you? And then thirdly, commit to an action plan. Commit to actions that you can take to apply what we've talked about today. If you want help, if you want some ideas, if you want some accountability, please contact me. Contact me by sending me a text, 913-306-1499. Put podcast follow-up in the text message, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you on our next broadcast.